All right, welcome to the Devhouse Agency podcast, your window into the metaverse. Today, I am your host, Jim Welch, and I am joined by Jasmine Shannon here, who is my co-host,
Hello.
and Adam Brzezowski will be joining us later as our guest for today's episode. So let's hop right into gear today. All right, I'm going to bring some stuff out. I'm going to have your help, Jasmine.
Okay.
We're going to talk about VR headsets today. So we're going to put these up on the table. You can just grab, we're just going to load this table up and show some stuff to the camera as we describe it. So there are a lot of VR headsets, of course, right? So we're going to talk high level because I don't want to get too technical and into the specs because most people probably don't care to that degree. But I want to talk about some of the main differences of some of the most popular headsets.
Can we grab this one too?
Yeah. We have like 7 headsets here that I didn't want to crowd us, but in hindsight, we should have just started with these on the table. So, okay. So anyone who is watching us here, I'm gonna hold this up to my camera. So, the Vive. All right. So this is the Vive headset. Now it looks here. This is a PC VR, meaning that it connects to your computer. It is not wireless. It does not have a computer chip inside that has a graphics card and all that sort of stuff. It looks wireless here because I just yanked the cords out, so it's easier to be portable. This will give you really good, again, high level graphics. Will be very nice on this. It uses your computer towers, power, and its graphics card. So you know, as development experiences are built, they can really leverage that technology. So this is great if you really want to push realism. The downsides of something like this, of course, is you're tethered. You're attached to something. You get tangled up in it. You have to buy a big, expensive computer. It's not always ideal for, especially someone who's casual. Maybe like your parents want to check out VR. Probably not the right thing for that. Or if you're a company building experiences for, you know, clients. If you expect your clients to be more casual, maybe it's like for VR therapy, maybe not great unless you're helping them set this up in their home.
Gotcha.
All right, why don't you show, what do you got there, Jasmine? What's that one?
This one here.
That's a Pico. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Pico is a lower, that particular one. So Pico is a company that makes a variety of headsets. That particular one with the beautiful Mind VR logo on the front, plug for our client. It's a good entry level headset. This particular one, it's a lot cheaper than some of the other ones on the market. But what you lose is like resolution. I believe these are all made in China. They're a Chinese company, and so you have to pay for shipment, of course, overseas. And so there's some downsides to it. Mostly, I recommend this if you're trying to get something that's a little more affordable that can sort of bypass the sort of walled garden of Facebook, right? Where it's like, hey, you have to go through Oculus Store and Facebook has to approve it. Well, just get a Pico, and then you don't have to go through that hassle.
And then I've noticed too, like some of them have like a touch sensor.
Mhm.
These actually have buttons. So I don't know if you
Right.
like the clicky bits or not. This one has clicky bits.
Yep, clicky bits. And there's our controller for that too. This gray controller is for the Pico. And so this guy, if you want to use the side bits, you can. Or you can hold this controller and it has a little trackpad that feels okay. And it has some buttons here you can interact with. The Oculus Go was before the Oculus Quest, and it reminds me of a similar thing that they had. I believe the Pico is 3 DOF. I'm trying not to get too technical, but basically 3 degrees of freedom, meaning you can rotate, look around all you want, but you're basically stuck. You're glued to the ground. So you can't walk. You can rotate and point. So, and then quickly covering these other 2 headsets. These are both Oculus Quests. So here and here, I don't know if these are both in frame, but the black Oculus Quest is a Quest 1. And the white one is the Quest 2. Between the 2, you get a resolution bump. And so you get basically from the Quest 1 to the Quest 2, you get about a 50% increase in resolution. And then there's also LCD. It used to be OLED, and now it's LCD. Not as important to most people, but just think a nicer resolution, more realism, that kind of thing.
And I feel like I see those more often.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Quests are definitely the I think 10 million headsets were shipped, I believe is the number that Facebook just very recently announced. So 10 million headsets of just this one are in the world, which is pretty cool because that means you have a market base of 10 million, right? And that's
Heck
not
yeah.
counting the Vive or the the Pico or we also had a DPVR, but there's a bunch of headsets. So
We didn't have enough table space for
no,
all
yeah,
of
we are short. There's some cool things like a Vive tracker. This little thing, it lets you kind of track positions of stuff. Here's a Vive's controller, which is much bigger than the little Pico. And then one more as I'm reaching behind me. This is the Quest controller. So you can see the controllers have different looks to them. They both track position. They both have buttons and clicky bits. And so they all kind of serve the same purpose, but they're made by different companies. Biggest takeaway here is PC VR for high quality, but it's kind of impractical logistically. Quest and Pico are portable, but the quality of resolution and things aren't quite as strong.
Well,
So
I learned a lot.
all right, so we are going to, as I keep getting off mic as I put these things off the table, we are going to jump now into our next segment, which is in the news.
Oh, that one's mine.
That is, yeah. So I brought Jasmine on today. So she is our project manager and head of operations here at Devhouse. And so I don't think this is offensive. The least technical here.
No, it's not. It's the truth.
So Jasmine is the least technical among us, but she is the best at handling logistical issues and just making sure things run smoothly. And so that'll make sense of why Jasmine's here talking with us when we get into our main segment. But Jasmine found this really cool article about a HoloLens 2 project. So I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I was pretty excited about this because I'm a huge fan of aquatic science. But the Smithsonian has...
It's a very specific thing to be a huge fan. Just aquatic science, not science, it's just aquatic
I'm a
science.
fan of all sciences, but specifically aquatic science.
Okay. What's your favorite aquatic animal? Say
Um,
dolphin, aren't you? Everyone
no,
says dolphin. Okay.
not a dolphin. Cuttlefish are really cute. Most mollusks are cute, but
Yeah.
cuttlefish, octopus, and squids.
Okay, you passed. I tested
Yeah.
you, and you knew you had an answer. That's good. Okay.
I even knew the phylum.
That's a word. That's great.
Okay, so at the Smithsonian, they have an immersive experience where you can put on a headset and you can see all the whales swimming around, specifically orcas, and you get to like walk.
Is that their
through-
phylum?
That's their species.
Oh, okay. And this is the it's not one of the VR headsets we're showing earlier. It's what we would call an MR headset, a mixed reality headset. And so this is the ones like so HoloLens 2 is a specific one here. A couple other episodes ago, we talked about the Campfire, which is basically it's more hologrammy type experiences. You're still seeing the real world, so you're seeing these whales in the real world around you. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's supposed to like bring like let everyone know like that they're endangered, and they walk you through like this whole family of orcas. And what I thought was really cool that you could actually reach up like this girl right here and like pet them, and they react to you petting them. So
That's cool.
yeah, I would definitely go.
Yeah. The mixed reality headsets are really neat. I think the biggest things that I'm hoping comes in the future is a bigger field of view, so like you can see more of the whale, and then also I don't know how they're going to do it, but I'm not a hardware builder, but making it less hologrammy looking, because like
Yeah.
even in these footages that are kind of compiled, you can see it's a bit transparent, and so that's a bit of a nature of the MRs. Things are kind of transparent looking, and so I'm excited for the day when it looks vivid and like it's actually there, which will be cool.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so these experiences are really good for, immersion and teaching people things, just because, you look at a photo or a video and it can be compelling. But, if you think of those like really sad Sarah McLachlan, help the children video commercials, right? If you read about it, you'd be a little sad. And then you see that video and you're like, I'm super sad.
Yeah.
This is like the next degree of that. It's like I'm in the whales, in their pod. I don't know if whales.
I'm not sure. I'm not a whale expert.
One less point.
Their
Aquatic
school?
fan.
I don't know.
Yeah, so you're in the group of whales, and so you feel more connected to them, than you would if you watched a video or looked at a photo or read an article about them. So
Yeah, not everybody can scuba. So this
Right.
is a close second to scubaing.
I feel like that's a
orcas.
good T-shirt slogan. Not everybody can scuba. I don't know. It just feels catchy. I like it. Awesome. Well, yeah. So if you're by the Smithsonian, go check this out because it sounds super super cool.
For sure.
Let's go into dev abominations. All right. So Today's dev abomination is a fun little thing that we got when we were making a football experience. So if you're watching this podcast through YouTube, you can kind of see this video we have on the screen. But it's basically a top down, think like Madden, football type play. This was actually for VR, but when you're developing VR, you're not always in first person view. You can pull the camera out and do work outside of that. And we were trying to get some real smart linebackers. It didn't it didn't work at first. So basically, we had some logic where the AI would say, "Hey, you're my guy. I'm going to try to get by you to get to the quarterback." Well, what happened is when those guys pursued the ball, they chased them, and then we had a conga line. And so all the football players just run the routes. Hey, you're a lineman, run the route. I don't care. So these are good examples of what. And then I just realized the ball just flies back. That was fun. So yeah, silly, weird things happen when you think you're being really clever and you make this AI that's like, oh, I'm gonna pick a specific target. I'm gonna do X, Y, Z, and then it falls apart and falls on its face, and then you have to replan it. So eventually, we did build this, and we have a nice little VR football game that we created, but it went through many stages of chaos.
I think the silver lining here is you might have discovered a new sport.
Yes.
I don't watch football, but
this is how football works. Yeah. I don't. I should have led with that. And you're like, oh yeah, I love this when the cowboy people do things and score points.
Cowboy people.
Cowboy people. Yes, they wear hats with their uniforms. Yeah. So that's our Dev Abomination for today. I think unless there's another site, we did the news today. We did Dev Abominations. We did gear. I think we're ready to jump into our guest segment. So let's bring up Adam Brzezowski and we can meet the man that is our guest today. Hey, Adam.
How's it going?
Good. Appreciate you taking the time today. I would love I always like to let guests introduce themselves because typically they know a lot of cool things that I will forget to share. So I would love to hear a bit about you and what, is important people know about what you do.
I don't know if I can make it any more exciting than you can, but I will do my best.
I'll be your hype man. I'll be like, yeah, he does that real good.
Okay. My name is Adam Brzezowski. I've been working in mobile and VR for over 15 years now. And pretty much primarily working in Unity, have done some Unreal stuff, but from those I've led projects and led teams to deliver multiple projects.
Yeah. Me and Adam met back when he was at, I think Bottle Rocket is when we first met, and they do a lot of mobile app development, less focused on Unity. But and then we later on worked together at a company years later that was kind of a Unity interactive type company. And we've kind of kept in touch and we keep both doing really cool stuff with our careers and able to follow each other and work together on certain projects. So today specifically what I brought Adam on to talk about and what Jasmine's here to help us talk about is kind of the life cycle of an XR or AR VR project or a Metaverse project, right? So what goes well, what goes poorly, and how we can sort of navigate that and the client flow. So if you want to work with a company like the Devhouse agency, what is there to expect there? What can you anticipate? So I think the best way to start is let's start with what is the one thing that you would say I wish I could tell a client this at the beginning of the project to save them headache down the road?
Let me think. I would say that let's do research together. A lot of times clients do research on their own and they just kind of tell us to do things, and it's you've hired the experts to help you do the thing. Let's share the let's share the load on that, so
right.
We can figure out an answer together, because that's usually what causes a lot of conflict.
Sure. Yeah.
Or challenges, I'll call it.
Yeah, because sometimes there's only the research is guided by the expectation of a result. And so if a client isn't familiar with what that result might be that they can expect, they might research the wrong area or kind of come with biased conclusions that might not be well informed. So yeah, sort of like a exploratory phase of a contract.
Hmm.
Is that anything that you have done with clients before, Adam, where you have sort of like the first couple weeks, maybe it's more scoping still, or from your experiences, typically sprint one, day one of a project, you're hitting the ground running?
I think it varies a whole lot. Um, and it varies on client because I've dealt with some clients who just want to say, "Hey, here's what we want, and we're walking away. Tell us when it's done."
Right.
Um, and there's been several situations where it was started off a VR project, and by the end of it, it was an AR project. Uh, and sometimes that works out well. Sometimes when a client will go with you through the process, you can do some great things that are not something you're just duplicating someone else who did something cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and a challenge, if they are open to the research, is you almost every engagement starts with scoping. So you want to determine, like what's the cost? If I want something build, I want to build an AR application, or oh, I have this great idea for this NFT collection that's going to integrate with this crypto coin. It's like, great, that sounds exciting. Here's what it's going to cost you because that's what you want to know. That's going to shift if you do some research together and you discover things. And so it's often kind of in contradiction to the best option. It's like, well, we want to give you a price, but we also want to explore the best path forward. So I always recommend with clients is that, give us your list of features, your list of needs, your kind of pain points, and then let's give you a ballpark price on solving those. But then the first, bit of the engagement is like, let's refine that. We're not going to add maybe a huge feature. Hopefully it's not a shift from AR to VR or something significant as that, but it's oh, instead of doing geolocation by latitude longitude, let's do it by an image recognition of this plaque on the ground.
Hmm.
And that's not such a significant development lift change. It's not so much harder that we need to reprice the project. It's just more refinement on process.
Hmm.
Yeah. What Adam, what would you say is like the best experience? Like, do you have like a project that comes to mind where you're like that project went really well, and you can sort of like isolate maybe why it went so well?
There's a couple, I will say, and they're not necessarily the same formula for everything.
Sure.
Um, I worked on a client AR project early on when ARKit first was released for iOS, and it was to basically do something that no one's done before. We got a whole lot of freedom on the development side to just basically, hey, build something that we want cool in the app, just so we can draw eyes to it. And that we got tons of freedom. And for the most part, the client was like, hey, yeah, love it. Let's put it in there.
Yeah, that's great.
That's kind of the dream.
Yeah.
Uh,
The client likes
but
all your
we had to
ideas.
eat some we had to eat some of the cost of that project because it was us learning something brand new that so it's kind of we split the cost of the R&D to find what the cool
That's
Right.
to
fair.
find the sweet spot of that. But there's other projects where I've worked on it where we give a general scope and have clear ideas, but usually if we have to give a specific budget, the cool factor gets whittled down to the minimum viable product. Um, and that's what's hard to explain to a client is like, hey, we've got some cool things we could push the boundaries of the uh, the medium, but to do that, we need to try A, B, and C and see which one works best.
Right. And that's
Um,
tough because they're spending they just kind of assume there's a one size fits all, and they don't want to waste money, with quotes there that, but sometimes that's sort of how software development works. It's not building a deck. It's not something that's been done that exact way 100,000 times. And even with the deck, I mean, there's like, well, what size of deck? What type of wood do you want?
Yeah, and I think the secret sauce there is having a client that understands that there's some R&D that goes into things instead of being like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll figure
Right.
it out and we'll check that off the list. There's some subtasks under there that need to get done first.
Yeah. And most our best clients tend to have experience with software development because then they understand the process. There are some things that go smoother than maybe a first time client would understand, but then there's things that are challenges that a first time client wouldn't even know to expect.
Hmm.
Which I think maybe leads me to another question. So Jasmine, what would if someone came to the DevHouse agency and said, "Hey, I want to build something." What's that process like? Like what from at a high level from like first engagement of like a phone call or an email to a delivery? Like what are like the big milestones and processes?
The big milestone is to really get your hands dirty and like what that project is going to be, what problem are you solving, kind of like that salesy, businessy part first. So that way
Right.
we're all aligned. And then after that, kind of thinking about a timeline, like do you have a deadline when this gets done, or is this going to be kind of like an organic, we'll build this together kind of thing? So that way we can kind of start like forming a schedule. And then after that, it's budget and manpower. So like
So
if
so there's like a potential for either maybe a retainer model where it's like, hey, we don't have a deadline. We're just gonna hire this studio to work with us and we'll pay them this much every month and we'll keep building it. We
Mhm.
definitely have some clients like that. And then we have other clients who have it. We want it released by, December of 2022. So what we can build in there is what we can build in there, and then we'll talk after and see what happens.
Yeah. So if they have a deadline at this point, it's like, okay, like what's your absolute goal? What are your stretch goals? And kind of just what do you want that end goal to be? And how can we shape that for you?
Right. And so then describe for anyone who doesn't know like what a sprint is or like, Jira or project management, like kind of explain the sprint process at a high level.
Okay, high level. It's basically it's a to-do list, right? You have a bunch of tasks and you give yourself little mini milestones. So a sprint will be a bunch of tasks that you do in a certain amount of time, and different people, different companies have different lengths of sprints that they want and start and end dates. At the Dev House, we typically do 2 week sprints, start on Monday, end on Friday, with a delivery on Friday, depending on the client.
Yep. And
Um,
those roll into bigger milestones. So you
mhm.
have these 2 week sprints that are like, hey, we have these 10 tasks. And then after those 2 weeks are done, then you're like, cool, now we do the next sprint. But then these 4 sprints might make up the alpha delivery.
Yeah.
And so these kind of help break down the big milestones into smaller bits. Adam, do you tend to follow like a strict Scrum methodology, which is like a bunch of very specific rules about sprint? Or how do you like to run projects?
I prefer the Scrum methodology, mainly because things change a lot, especially with AR and VR. Things are evolving quickly, and a lot of things are very much subject to how it feels in the experience. So planning all that ahead of time, which would be the waterfall method
Right.
of designing everything ahead of time before you touch the code base or anything, um, doesn't work as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm sure once the rules of AR and VR are more firmly set, that would be a viable path. But for the most part, um, I think Scrum and putting it in sprints makes sense because of the quick turn times and quick reviews.
Right. So yeah, the waterfall versus agile sort of methodology, and we do a mix of the two here at DevHouse. I mean, we try to kind of waterfall plan out the design, but every 2 weeks we re-sprint plan and we adjust,
Hmm.
and so that way we can keep on top of sort of the ever changing, but at least we have a target that we hope to hit, and we just update that as we go.
Yeah, and I would also say like like to be a good development company is to be able to be flexible. Like we have a sweet spot of what we fall into, which is doing that 2 week sprint plan. But we've had clients that have wanted something different. So it's just being versatile and being flexible is also important.
Yeah, and then actually is a good segue into I think a challenge for some client studio relationships, which is sort of the process. And so sometimes as a studio, there's a bit of an education process where we try to teach our clients what we've found works really well. It might be their first project or maybe their second or third, but we we've done dozens and dozens of projects, and so from that experience we can say, yeah, it'd be really good if we don't add new tasks mid sprint. That's a really bad habit and we shouldn't do that.
Hmm.
And they want to, though. They're like, oh, I just thought of something. And you have to sort of train them, be like, okay, that's great, let's log it over here in a separate list, and then on the next sprint planning we can maybe drag that in, right?
Yeah, proper
um,
etiquette.
Yes, proper etiquette is helpful. So I guess going back to the high level stuff, you meet with a client, they discuss their pain points, you work collaboratively, discover a great solution based on the studio's experience and the client's desire. You then do milestone planning, saying here's our big points that we hit. And then you break those milestones down into sort of baby 2 week sprints, maybe 1 week if you're very, very agile. And then after that, like we're in mid sprint, things are going well. What does a client expect for like deliverables or things like that? What can a client expect to see in communication once things are fully underway?
All of these things would be discussed like before we got started, but definitely we would have like a meeting cadence, how often we meet, and then when deliverables will be sent, and then when we actually do send them, we'll send a change log. Like we're not going to get the whole lab done, in 2 weeks. So like these are the things that are included in this build. So don't freak out if you see A, B, and C. We're still working on it.
Right. And that's important. And I think worth noting that when a client isn't familiar with the process, they might get something to be like, oh my gosh, when the app it launches, it flashes red for a second. And that concerns them because like it's not supposed to do that. And so drawing their attention to the change log of like, these are the things that we did over this sprint helps guide the focus. Like, okay, if
Hmm.
one of those things on that list is wrong, then yes, point that out. Everything else, just kind of put your blinders on and look at it sort of objectively. Objectively, yeah,
Hmm.
objectively. Uh, Adam, have you found there's any point where there's like too much communication or too little communication? Do you have a sweet spot that you like when working with clients on how to communicate and how often to communicate?
Not really, because it depends on the client. There are
Yeah.
clients who will give you a project and you run with it and don't want to hear anything until it's done or until it looks something that might be shippable.
Right.
Uh,
That's a challenge
it,
because
it's that
sometimes you hold it, and you're right. It's based on the
yeah,
client. We have one client that we work with that he's very we click like he what we create he tends to always like, and it works really well. But sometimes you build something and you're afraid to show them because it's not done, and then but then maybe you wait too long and then you've gone too far. It's can be tricky.
yeah. I've had clients where if I show them a gray box of a level or a model or something like that, they don't know how to process it, and they feel like we've stepped backwards
Right. And that's a good
from
a
showing
term
them
for anyone who's not familiar.
practice.
What is a gray box? Like help define that for the listeners.
Sure. A gray box would be essentially a level, a scene, an environment that's set up in just grayscale, just gray blocks or gray pieces to give us a general area to live in. To say, hey, here's the size of the room. Hey, there'll be a tree that goes here. It looks like a blocky tree, but it's a tree.
Hmm.
Right.
So then an artist can come back and go, I'm going to replace this blocky tree with a real tree. But it gives an overall experience early in development to say, hey, this is the space we're going to live in.
Yep. Yeah, I always think of it as sort of like concept art in a way, which is a very different thing, but in the same idea that it helps give a little picture of what it could be. It's not good. The concept art, isn't going to look anything like the same. If, for example, I've been watching The Mandalorian lately, and at the end of each episode, they have the concept art, and it's gorgeous and it looks amazing. And sometimes the real shots match up a lot, but it's a totally different medium. One is two dimensional. The characters don't necessarily look like the characters, but you get a sense. You're like, oh yeah, there's a sand crawler that's going to be in the distance, and the Mandalorian's going to be right in the front, and so you get that concept. Same with the gray box. It's like, oh, I'm going to be inside the building. I thought we discussed being outside, and you can solve that quickly. And we do it a lot also for our internal projects. We don't want our programmers to be waiting on art to be able to lay out the pathing and stuff for where characters walk. So we want to put these sort of placeholder gray box experiences so the programmers can keep going, and then the artists, and art takes time, and so the artists can go in and slowly replace those assets. Is there, I it's dangerous, but is there any horror stories without spotlighting and embarrassing anybody that you have, Adam, that you can generalize that pop to mind that you've had?
Um, there was some stuff with one of the clients we worked with, um, where we did try to show them. So the sales presentation that involved showed a Photoshop together, essentially mocked version of what we would be building.
Hmm.
And then when we started building it, we did a gray box, and we're trying to get client feedback early and often.
Yep.
Um, and doing that, they felt like, oh, we already saw what essentially what we wanted. Now this seems like we've taken 10 steps back in the process to make that a reality. And that's, I understand that from a client point of view, but I also think that is just a miscommunication on our part of saying what the expectation is. Um, and there are clients who that just doesn't work with. They can't see past the small details to see the bigger picture.
Right.
If it's the wrong color, they're going to get caught up in the color and not um, the overall meaning. Even if you have a change log that they're supposed to focus on, they're focused on, oh, that's not our brand colors.
Right.
It's like we haven't any coloring, so
That's why, like, I think it's really important to be transparent with your clients, and then also like find what works for them. Because I mean, you said it, it's probably like a communication issue. Like, we thought we were doing all the things right, we had a change log and everything, and you're not understanding. It's like, okay, how can we translate this into a way that you can understand? Because like that's our job, you know. So again trying to find that secret spot where the wavelengths and communication is being streamlined the way it should be.
Right. And that's why, initially when we started up Devhouse, we didn't have like a dedicated project manager. I started the company, and I'm a developer, and I have some leadership experience, but I was managing myself, and then I hired more developers and then artists. And at some point, especially when you work with more sophisticated projects and larger projects like we do now, bringing someone like Jasmine on is really important. And so I guess a word of warning for anyone that wants to work with the software studio, it's highly recommended you work with a studio that has a project manager, because
Yeah.
we worked with the client in the past. It's like, oh, I don't need that. And it's like, I get that feeling, but you really do, because they help with that communication, and it's so critical for everyone to do the right things. Like, you can give someone a task. A good analogy is like if you go to Fiverr or Upwork and you try to hire a developer maybe overseas, they'll do work, and they'll do work at a good rate, but they won't necessarily understand the exact intention. Or
Hmm.
you may not know what you really need because you make assumptions based on your own biases. And so that project manager is a perfect sort of bridge between, the experts, the developers, the artists, and the client. They know just enough of both worlds that they can bridge that communication gap. And we found projects without project managers tend to go really poorly. And so it's one of those things, when people look at bosses, they're always like, oh, bosses aren't important, managers aren't important, until you become one, or you have a project without one, and you're like, oh, I get why they get.
I get
Yeah, I get
it.
why they're paid to do a job, because a company wouldn't pay for these people if it wasn't important, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, super highly recommended that's a project manager is always involved. And you have some sort of place for tasks to live, like,
Yeah.
even if it's Trello is like a good example, very simple, like it's almost like a to-do list. I don't recommend that as like a sophisticated solution, but those types of applications are important, because you need a sort of source of truth of like, here's where the tasks live, they move from here to here, here's our process, so everyone can stay aligned. Alignment's shockingly important. A bunch of effort can go in one direction and it could be the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So any, I guess, final thoughts, Adam, on if you could, if let's say every client you ever have in the future will listen to this, and you can impart some kind of wisdom that will save you headache and save your team's headache, what would you ask, or what would you like to say to those clients?
I'm going to answer this in two parts because I think part of the blame is on myself. I don't want to take fault away from myself when in doing this in me, because a lot of times what I struggle with is, because we're iterating on a product, I want to think agile and evolve the product, but there is we're doing client work. There is a scope that we defined at the beginning, and we don't do a good job of spelling out what that scope is in development before we start working on it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's also
So
a
the client
fear.
comes back and says, "Say again."
I was going to say there's also a fear, at least I've experienced a fear of expressing when the very real situation of software development that something changes or you hit a roadblock. You're like, man, that feature sounded easy, but it's not. And you don't want to give the client bad news sometimes. And I think sometimes that's, like you said, to take blame to ourselves. I know that's something that we try to do better with. That it's like, well, we want to make the client happy. We want to bend over backwards, but sometimes that paints us into a corner. And so you're right. It's a two-way street.
You got to stay transparent.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
And it's hard to push back on a client to say, hey, that's out of scope of what we originally agreed on, when we haven't really, as developers, defined what that scope was.
Right.
We're building something, we've got general things that are, especially with AR and VR, you're living in a world that is bleeding edge and not very well defined. Um, so we have to do our due diligence to define what we're building, so we know when the client's asking us something that's gonna push that deadline and cause us to uh, change our scope more than we can truly afford for the budget.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I really wish clients could understand the back and forth of working with a team. You really, when you're hiring a dev team, a lot of times it's, you want something done. It's not as easy as a website or an a phone app, in the fact that a lot of the stuff that's been done there has been done there for years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, hey, pick the calendar off this, pick the rewards off this, and put them together. It's a balancing act, and it's something that takes a little give and take.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. That's a great answer.
Just patience with, patience and understanding you don't know like the meat of these like really big tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's software development's complicated. It's not a simple thing. It's very technical, and I always equate it to when you like renovate a house. Like even that, which I think is much technically less complicated, it's very hard for those teams to properly set expectations. They open up a wall. Oh shoot, there was a pipe in here, right? We didn't know that. Sorry, now we got to move this pipe. We're going to do a change order, charge you more money. It's going to take longer. There's like that's a known thing that sucks, but it's just like everyone kind of knows to expect that. With software development, it's the same thing. You open up a functional pipe in a piece of code, and you're like, oh shoot, that worked great on iOS, but on Android they just released a new OS build for the device, and now it doesn't work on Android anymore. So now we have to come up with a brand new solution. We had no idea because this happened after we started development. So there's a complicated process. So yeah, but same question to you, Jasmine. Is there anything you would like to guys communicate to help brands succeed in working with software companies?
I kind of mentioned it before. I think it's transparency, like, which goes back to communication. Like if you don't understand something, or if there's anything that's misaligned, definitely communicate it and kind of, I don't work through it, set more meetings, like do what you need to do to make sure that you can understand all the things that you need to understand. That's on the development side, and that's on the client side.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess just for me to add another concept in here, I think this one's a little bit more specific, and maybe not as generally valuable, but a good thing to watch out for is just try to establish either a set design, or be aware that as designs change, so will scope and budget. So that's a thing that I think both sides uncomfortable talking about because it's money, and people are uncomfortable talking about money and asking for more money or giving more money. So it's like when scope changes, it's different amounts of work, which means the money is affected, and no one wants to have that conversation. But it's just something to keep in mind. So if it needs to happen, have that conversation. Otherwise, if it's like, no, this is the budget, let's find a way to avoid changing. Maybe another meeting, the transparency, like,
Hmm.
oh, we think we want to change this AR experience to VR. Well, let's really talk about that. See if that's really necessary to solve your pain point. And maybe it's not, and then everyone can be saved the headache of that challenging rescoping meeting. So
Right.
yeah, wonderful. Well, we have 5 questions. Is that our numbers there?
Yeah, go
All
for
right.
it.
Oh, good. Eric Peterson, our awesome guy here, rewrote these in legible handwriting for me. So, all right. Well, we're gonna alternate. So hopefully you can also read his writing, which is actually very clear. I'm quite impressed. All right. Question 1, Adam. Uh, I would like you to define, in your opinion, what is the metaverse?
So I think this answer will evolve as we get into it more. Right now, the metaverse is kind of defined as kind of just what VR provides for us, but I think that and AR will integrate more seamlessly into our lifestyles. And once that happens, it almost will bleed into what we see as our phone content and our real lives.
Love it. All right.
All
Question
right.
2.
All right. Number two is, what is the coolest tech you expect to see in the next 5 years?
And this,
There's two things that I'd probably fall into this category.
sure.
What was that, Jim?
I was gonna say, and this can be. I always think hardware, but if you don't have a hardware thing that excites you, you could focus on like maybe more software. But yeah, go ahead.
Um, I think hardware wise, we've got to figure out how to, if VR and AR are going to take off, is how to handle haptics, how to handle response to user input, um, where people don't have to look down to interact with things, where you could hold something off camera and it stays in your hand and you can feel it. All of that is super difficult. It's a super hard problem, and it would be nice if someone would please solve that.
Yes, that is actually really good. I like that answer. We'll have to cover this in one of our other episodes, news segments. But I know Facebook, one of their departments, announced that they're working on something that I mean, lots of companies have been doing haptics for a while, but Facebook has something new that they're doing that I'm hoping goes well. Question 3: what
But
tech do you expect
let
to?
me
Oh,
let
go
me
ahead.
do the second part of that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, yeah.
I was going to say, I think for all of this to take off of, we've got to find a way for it to be used in almost like an office environment. Where is the app that is Excel for VR or AR, that businesses can't move forward, or it just excels our process so much by using those platforms over our phone or a 2D screen.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
it's
sorry.
like the killer app but for enterprise almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what question 3: what tech do you expect to fail in the next 5 years?
I'm gonna go off. I saw the podcast with Steve, and he mentioned VR is gonna um, go away. I think it's gonna be merged. Honestly, I think AR and VR are gonna become one, and we're gonna figure out a way to make AR more vivid and be in that process be able to black or cover the entire screen with that vivid image, making VR not necessarily its own thing anymore.
Right.
So I don't know if it's gonna die completely, but I think they'll become one.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I know that recently there was an update to Oculus that lets pass through be a thing, right? So you're looking through the lens of the cameras while you're interacting with the digital assets, though the quality of the pass through is very low, and that. But I like that take. I agree with you.
I'm sorry, I don't have much to contribute. I'm just gonna be asking the questions here. What is your favorite immersive experience?
Um, I think I'm a big fan of Superhot.
Yep, it's a great
Um,
game.
I enjoy it. It is um, not realistic enough, but still easy to get lost in it and spend hours in that experience um, without realizing it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So if anyone who isn't familiar with Superhot, it's a VR game. Well, before it was VR, it was I guess PC, but it's a VR game where basically every time you make a movement, the time it progresses. So if you stand perfectly still, the whole world is frozen, and as you move, it moves. So if you move really fast, the whole scene will play really fast. You move really slow, and it's almost like Neo in the Matrix simulator. It's like, okay, I'm gonna dodge this bullet, and I'm gonna grab this knife and throw it at that guy, and so you're trying to like watch and plan, and it's yeah, it's very very cool, and it has this very striking visual,
Hmm.
like red against white sort of thing that makes me think of Mirror's Edge, which Mirror's Edge is also an amazing game. Which
Wonderful game.
I don't think they've done a VR port of that, which feels like a missed opportunity.
Someone should do
Yeah,
it.
call us at Devhouse.
Will help.
Wait, there's my camera. Call us.
Call.
What is that? EA? I think EA published Mirror's Edge, but okay. Last question. I think we're on our question number 5. What interactive experience would you like to see? So this isn't something you've seen yet, but you're like, man, I wish someone would build X.
Okay. Again, I'll hit back to the Excel for VR or Excel for AR. But I've looked into doing graphics and stuff like that. It all falls short because we associate all that stuff with 2D. There's a
Right.
point of reference where we stop thinking 2D and get more information by a 3D reference. And I have not found a good point of that. But if we can do that, that would be, I think, where it can really take off in enterprise, which will bring more people to bring it home.
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic that probably needs its whole own episode. But idiomatic design. So the idea that you don't build the same type of experience for a two-dimensional Excel document as you do for a three-dimensional VR experience that's meant to solve the same problem. You don't want maybe you want do you even want graphs? If you want graphs, well, should they be two-dimensional or should it be a big cube that you can grab with your hand and pull up and or a pie chart that you can pull apart? Designing, trying to recreate what we're used to in 2D doesn't always isn't always the best service of a new platform and a new way. I think a good example of where this falls short is VR games that have been ported from PC games. Superhot works great, and I think the developer even said like VR is what Superhot was meant for. Like it's the platform it should have lived on initially. But certain things like what is it, Fallout? I love the Fallout games, but that one on VR for me personally, I did not like navigating. I was having to like constantly teleport my character little by little through the world. It was not
Yeah.
satisfying. Like I dropped it after the first 10 minutes and I was like, I'm good. So we want to think about design for the devices and how to elevate those experiences based on the device's strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, we should.
And I think a huge weakness is with that is that we're so used to a keyboard where we have so
Yeah,
many input devices that are binary, that are just on or off. Um, and unless we can get like voice recognition to be really close to 100% accurate, that we can't really replace what a keyboard does for us.
right. Yep. Yep. And then also, what if you don't want to? You're in a public place, and how do you handle that? So it's a lot of interesting
Yeah.
ideas. That's also it's very exciting to be in this space because we get to explore these and with clients and our own internal projects.
Uncharted dream.
Yes, yeah, we're all, which is part of our company kind of, slogan, I guess, is, pioneer, discover, share. We love pioneering. We love being out there on the forefront. Wonderful. Well, Adam, if anyone wants to reach out to ask you questions, learn more about what you do, is there a good way to find you, to contact you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, um, and you can follow me on Twitter, AdamCBRZ. I don't post there very often, but I don't mind having conversations.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time, Adam. It's really fun talking about projects and stuff with you. These are the kind of conversations we have internally a lot about, how do we improve this process, and it's great to kind of expose that to, the outside world a bit, and how projects and basically a client and development studio can work together for better success. So again, thank you, Adam, and appreciate your time, and we'll see you later.
See you later.
Thank you all.
All right. So we're gonna wrap up our episode. We appreciate Jasmine joining us today. We're gonna cycle our different co-hosts from different folks from the Devhouse in and out as they kind of can speak to their specialties, and I'll be the guy that's always here whether you like it or not. So yeah. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.